Coming up on Network Africa. Police deployed as Kenyan opposition defies protest ban. Clashes erupt ahead of Senegal opposition leader's trial. And Lesotho MP demands land reform from South Africa as South Africa declares that it will not cede any part of its territory. Hello and welcome to the program. I'm Joka Rogers here in Lagos. We begin today in Kenya, where increased police presence has been mounted in Nairobi, the capital of the country, ahead of scheduled opposition protests today. Local media outlets have been sharing pictures of water cannons and riot police stationed in opposition strongholds across the city. Roadblocks have also been mounted on routes leading to the president's official residence. Although businesses are open in the city centre and public transport vehicles are operating, authorities have suspended train services in Nairobi ahead of the demonstrations. According to some media reports, protesters in the western towns of Kisumu, Homa Bay and Migori have already blocked roads with bonfires and rocks. Meanwhile, police in Senegal fired tear gas and stun grenades at people demonstrating in the capital, Dakar, on the eve of a libel trial of an opposition leader. Authorities have banned protests relating to today's resumption of Usman Sonko's court case, but the main opposition coalition says it'll defy the restrictions. Mr. Sonko is accused of defaming the terrorism minister's name, Nyang, with allegations of embezzlement. He denies these charges. If found guilty, Mr. Sonko would be barred from running in next year's presidential election. There has been violence in several cities since Mr. Sonko's defamation trial opened on March the 16th. And the United States Vice President Kamala Harris has arrived in Tanzania, where she was greeted by Vice President Philip Mpango. She will meet President Samia Suluhu today on this leg of her first Africa tour, where she's expected to raise the issue of Tanzania's non-alignment over the war in Ukraine. The U.S. has been keen to get more countries to condemn the Russian invasion. On Friday, she will fly to Zambia, where she will meet President Hakainde Hichilema and then leave on Saturday, April the 1st. Correspondents covering the tour say the U.S. Vice President's visit comes at a time of growing competition for influence in Africa by global powers such as China and Russia. Joining us now to discuss the U.S. Vice President's visit is VOA correspondent Anita Powell. Anita joins us online from Tanzania. Thank you for joining us today.
Always a pleasure.
So give us a sense of what the atmosphere was like when the VP arrived in Tanzania.
I think it can be summed up in one word that may be familiar to your viewers, karibu. That is the Kiswahili word meaning welcome. Vice President Harris was given an extremely warm welcome here in Dar es Salaam, in the main city in Tanzania, and that has continued throughout the day with several meetings that she's had with entrepreneurs, with the president, with governance officials, and so on.
The VP is expected to discuss the war in Ukraine with the president. How is that likely to go? Do you see Tanzania tilting to Russia or Ukraine after these talks?
That's the million-ruble question, isn't it? So the only mention we heard of Ukraine was when Kamala Harris did mention this in her joint statement with President Samia Suluhu Hassan, and she mentioned that Tanzania has generally supported the U.S. in its condemnation of Russia, but it notably abstained from the key vote. Whereas the president of Tanzania, she mentions the effect that supply chain disruptions and food insecurity are having on Tanzania because of this conflict. But that's as far as the leaders went in public. Obviously, this is on the agenda, Obviously, this was discussed behind closed doors, but as we all know, this is a delicate conversation because of these ties between African countries and the former Soviet Union and Russia today. So this is an ongoing conversation and a very sensitive one.
So what other issues are up for discussion during this visit to Dar es Salaam?
You know, what isn't on the table? Today, Vice President Harris reminded Tanzanians that $560 million are being given to the government of Tanzania on a bilateral basis next year in the U.S. budget. She outlined a number of agreements that have been signed, including a pretty interesting one that will allow nickel to be mined here in Tanzania. This is nickel for electric cars, and that program should go online by 2026. Also, a banking agreement, several health agreements for health cooperation in fighting diseases that are endemic here, like malaria, continuation of AIDS funding, and so on and so forth. So they covered a broad, wide, deep range of issues.
Right, Anita, her visit to Africa does not cover all of the countries on the continent. Several African countries have wondered why they've not been chosen for this leg of the tour. But those countries she has visited, Ghana and what have you, I mean, why do you think Tanzania is in the pick for her visits to Africa?
Well, one thing that's notable about Tanzania today, is that it has the only female head of state on the continent. This is symbolic, this is historic, this is interesting, especially since we have a female vice president for the first time in American history. So that is one reason. The other reason that Vice President Harris has outlined herself is that these are robust, healthy, developing democracies. The three countries that she's visiting does include Ghana and Zambia in addition to Tanzania. So those are some reasons. They're also English-speaking countries. They have historic ties with the United States. And to answer your question about why no U.S. official has visited all of them, there are 54 countries. That would take quite some time.
Right, so how much more do Tanzanians stand to benefit from this trip by the U.S. Vice President?
I think that remains to be seen. I mean, I mentioned the agreements that were outlined today and the bilateral engagement. The president of Tanzania did ask Vice President Harris for some specific things, specifically more engagement on long-term visas for Tanzanians who wish to go to the U.S., a 10-year extension on the Africa Growth and Opportunities Act, which I'm sure Nigeria is very familiar with, and also, and everybody's asking for this, a visit from President Joe Biden.
Right. Anita, thank you so much for joining us today on the program.
My pleasure.
Let's move on. U.S. Ambassador to Sudan, John Godfrey, has been discharged from hospital after sustaining minor injuries in a car crash in the capital, Khartoum. The embassy said 2 other employees were also involved in the accident. It did not state the cause of the crash, but said the trio was taken to a local hospital for evaluation after experiencing minor injuries. Ambassador Godfrey is now resting at home. Mr. Godfrey is the first U.S. ambassador to Sudan in nearly a quarter of a century and arrived in the country in August 2022. The two countries opened a new chapter in 2021 after Sudan completed paying compensation to American victims of terror attacks in Kenya, Tanzania, and Yemen. French court has sentenced a Rwandan man to 4 years in jail for starting a fire that severely damaged a Gothic cathedral in the western city of Nantes in 2020. Priceless artifacts and paintings were also destroyed in the blaze. The court ruled that Emmanuel Abiyisenga, a volunteer at the Cathedral of St. Peter and St. Paul, was not mentally sound at the time of the fire. In addition to the prison sentence, the court also banned Abiyisenga from staying in the Atlantique region where Nantes is located for 5 years and prohibited him from bearing arms. He has reportedly asked unsuccessfully for asylum in France several times and in 2019 received a deportation order. Prosecutors say the defendant knowingly caused the fire due to huge anger and a feeling of revenge linked to his administrative situation. MPs in Lesotho are debating a motion to reclaim huge tracts of land from its giant neighbor, South Africa. Opposition MP Sepo Liholo said it's time for what is ours to be returned to us. He said while this was an issue dating back many decades, he believed it was still an important issue that needed addressing. His motion is based on a 1962 UN resolution that recognized the right to self-determination and independence for the people of Basutoland, as Lesotho was called before its independence in 1966. Meanwhile, South Africa's minister in the presidency, Kambudzo Ntshavheni, has said that the territorial borders of South Africa will not be changing in any way, despite the debate in Lesotho's parliament on reclaiming what they call their land from within South African territory. The minister was answering questions during her weekly post-cabinet briefing today, where she also told the media that the cabinet is yet to get an expected legal opinion to help government decide on the issue of the visit to South Africa by the Russian President Vladimir Putin, for whom the International Criminal Court has issued a warrant of arrest over alleged war crimes. We asked the minister the position of the cabinet on the Lesotho parliament debate.
On the question around the discussions taking place in Lesotho, the simple and straightforward issue is that South Africa has its defined borders and has a responsibility to protect its what we call territorial integrity, and the borders are known internationally and will allow the Parliament of Lesotho to decide what they discuss, but the territorial integrity of South Africa will never be threatened, so everybody can sleep peacefully. On the questions regarding the ICC and the legal opinion has not yet been served to Cabinet, and the Cabinet will express its view when that matter is served by the relevant department, which is the Department of International Relations and Cooperation, and will advise accordingly. And the other question was, we cannot talk about what are the factors that we are considering as yet, because we don't have the submission as Cabinet on the matter. When we receive the submission, we'll then deal with the matters and we'll update accordingly. Whether the South Africa is considering withdrawing from the ICC, you will recall that South Africa had started to table a bill which was in Parliament for the withdrawal from the ICC, and the governing party went to its national conference and took a resolution not to withdraw, and that bill has subsequently been withdrawn from Parliament, I think 3 weeks ago.
The Defence Force, the BDF, has denied reports that its soldiers deployed in northern Mozambique for peacekeeping are starving due to shortage of food. The army dismissed a local newspaper report titled "BDF Troops Starving," terming it baseless and unfounded. In a statement, BDF said its soldiers in Mozambique's restive Cabo Delgado province are physically and morally supported to attain fighting power. About 300 BDF troops were deployed in 2021 under the Southern Africa Development Community mission to Mozambique. And the United Nations is concerned that the intensification of conflict in eastern DRC continues to inflict untold suffering on civilians and to worsen a humanitarian situation which is increasingly catastrophic. Bintu Keita, who is the special representative of the Secretary General in the Democratic Republic of Congo, ahead of the United Nations Organization Civilization Mission in the DRC, says the situation is particularly devastating in North Kivu.
While insecurity spreads, tensions between the DRC and Rwanda have continued to increase, resulting in several cross-border incidents. These confrontations pose severe risk of regional escalation.
Unfortunately, the situation continues to deteriorate due to the DRC's leaders' lack of political will, urgency, and inaction. It has become evident that even though this conflict continues to inflict terrible suffering on the civilian populations, The government of the DRC is using it as a political stunt to obtain domestic support and silence opposition ahead of the upcoming elections.
Welcome back to the program. We'll have more for you from the Democratic Republic of Congo. And the spokesperson for the UN Secretary General, Stefan Dujarric, has been updating journalists on the latest attacks by the armed Codeco group in the country. Speaking in New York, he said that during the Codeco group's attack in Ituri province's Jugu territory, 17 civilians were reportedly killed in 2 separate incidents.
So temporary shelter. Quick update from the Democratic Republic of the Congo, where unfortunately there have been more attacks by armed groups, by the armed Codeco group. Over the weekend in Ituri province, Jugu territory, 17 civilians were reportedly killed in 2 separate attacks. The armed group also opened fire on UN peacekeepers and Congolese Defence Forces who were jointly conducting patrols to protect civilians around Jugu. During the incident, our peacekeepers and the Congolese military returned fire, prompting the assailants to flee. In the area of Drodro and Ro, southeast of Jugu, peacekeeping mission continued to respond to the persistent insecurity caused by Codeco. Our colleagues facilitated the transport of 28 civilians, mostly women, from Drodros to Ro site for internally displaced people. The mission also temporarily sheltered civilians at its base in Drodro following the attacks by Codeco at a nearby church. They also evacuated a man injured during the attack. Our colleagues in Kabul of the UN Assistance Mission in Afghanistan said that Machula Wessa, an advocate, a well-known advocate for girls' education and founder of the Pen Path, was arrested in Kabul on Monday. We call for the de facto authorities to clarify his whereabouts, the reasons for his arrest, and to ensure his access to legal representation as well as contact with his family. The UN mission also said it has been in contact with the relevant de facto authorities in Kabul regarding the case of Mr. Wessa, as well as other activists and journalists who remain in detention.
And the World Health Organization committee has reviewed the evidence for 4 Marburg vaccines. According to the Director General of the World Health Organization, Dr. Tedros Ghebreyesus, the agency is in Equatorial Guinea with partners supporting the Ministry of Health to respond to the outbreak of Marburg virus disease. The WHO and partners, including UNICEF, the US CDC and MSF, have offered support to the government to bridge any gaps in the response
to the outbreaks of Marburg virus disease in Equatorial Guinea and Tanzania. In Equatorial Guinea, WHO is on the ground with partners supporting the Ministry of Health to respond to the outbreak. We have deployed teams to assist with case finding, clinical care, logistics, and community engagement. We have also helped to establish treatment units in the affected areas. The number of officially reported cases remains at 9, with 7 deaths in 3 provinces. However, these 3 provinces are 150 kilometers apart, suggesting wider transmission of the virus. In Tanzania, the number of confirmed cases remains at 8, with 5 deaths. 3 people are currently being treated in a health facility. 2 health workers are among the confirmed cases, including 1 death. So far, all of the reported cases are in 1 region. WHO is working to begin trials of vaccines and therapeutics as soon as possible. The WHO committee has now reviewed the evidence for 4 vaccines. Trial protocols are ready, and our partners are ready to support the trials.
Human rights campaigners are calling on companies to increase the pay for impoverished miners in the Democratic Republic of Congo who are digging up cobalt, an essential commodity in the production of electric cars. That's the warning from 2 human rights groups, the UK's RAID and CAJ, which is based in the southern DR Congo, near Kolwezi, where most of the world's cobalt is mined. Food prices there have been soaring, and the campaign groups say most miners are being paid much less than $480 a month they need to support their families. The groups want the mining giants, including those from Europe and China, that operates DR Congo's industrial mines to pay more and electric vehicle companies to end contracts with cobalt suppliers exploiting the miners. Refugees and host communities are benefiting from a water project in Gambela, Ethiopia. The project supplies clean piped water to over 220,000 people in the community, most of whom are refugees, and aims to strengthen cohesion between refugees and their hosts. UNHCR representative in Ethiopia, Patrick Okello, says the water project was set up in 2014.
Right now, a total of 230,000 refugees are benefiting from these water supply systems in 3 camps, and also 30,000 host community members are benefiting from the same service. This project is very crucial for the refugees and host community who are actually living together. It brings about peaceful coexistence between refugees and host community, but beyond that, it is changing the lives of the people in terms of improving their health and life well-being, and also in terms of building their livelihood.
Oscar Pistorius is up for a hearing in South Africa on Friday, where it's expected he will argue he should be paroled over the murder of his girlfriend, Reva Steenkamp. After a lengthy legal process, the former South Africa Paralympic superstar athlete was convicted of murder in 2016 for killing Steenkamp and jailed for 13 years and 5 months. Pistorius, known as Blade Runner for his carbon fiber prosthetic legs, went from public hero to convicted murderer in a trial that drew worldwide interest. Once the darling of the Paralympic movement for pushing for greater recognition and acceptance of disabled athletes, Pistorius shot dead Steenkamp, a model and law student, in his bathroom on Valentine's Day in 2013. Initially found guilty of culpable homicide, the prosecution successfully overturned that ruling, and instead, Pistorius was found guilty of murder. The now 36-year-old is eligible for release on parole after serving half of the sentence. Inspired by the famous Paris-Dakar rally, organizers of the Senegal race wanted to create an event where women and men could compete on an equal footing. Now, Fatima Ba, who started racing 2 decades ago, can say she races men and wins. Here's the report.
Cheered on by her family, driver Fatimata Ba raises her arms in triumph after winning an amateur motor drag race in Dakar that saw 4 men and 4 women competing for first place. Earlier, pairs of drivers in small Peugeot hatchbacks had raced to make the best time on a makeshift track at the old airport in Dakar, part of the capital's first so-called Dakar Grand Prix in late February.
Usually they say women at the wheel, death at the corner, which is an old adage. And today, I proved that that was not the case. And tomorrow, I'll do it again. I was first, and Nafisa came third. So the women didn't lose out. Being a woman or a man doesn't mean anything. This is the 21st century. Girl power.
Ba and other female drivers, one of whom placed third, are keen to challenge gender stereotypes in sometimes socially conservative Senegal and elsewhere.
I dedicate this trophy to my father and my husband, who have always supported me in this passion, which is usually reserved for men. This race is much more for the underprivileged children, for the needy children who need to smile and hope. This cup is to show them that everything is possible in life. With courage and perseverance, you can do it. I am happy.
Ba started racing 20 years ago after her father encouraged her to share his interest in cars. Her husband, mechanic Sheikh Tidiane Batley, is also her coach.
What I feel in these moments is pride for me and joy for her, because I know this is something she loves. To have won after all the effort it took, Frankly, it was very satisfying. I acted nice because there were other guys there telling everyone that she's my wife. It makes you proud.
Bar donated her winnings to the SOS Children's Village organization, where she's worked since quitting banking.
Yeah, girl power. Congratulations to her. Well, that's it on the program today. Thank you so much for watching. I'm Jokia Rogers.